So welcome. And we encourage all of you to watch Zac talk to us about risk thinking. Uh, we have the distinct pleasure of listening to Zac Jarrard talking about the quality manager as risk manager, a deep dive into risk management. This is your moderator, Doug Wood, with ASQ's Quality Management Division. Now, please join me in welcoming Zac to give us our talk tonight. Now, Zac Jarrard is the president of Jarrard Consulting. His company is dedicated to bringing out the best in people through team building activities, project management training, and workshops to improve intergenerational communication at work. Now, Zac holds 3 master's degrees from Park University and several certifications. His research interests include gamification, project management, and working across different generations. Outside of his company, Zac is heavily involved in the community. He's a proud ASQ senior member who serves as the past chair of the Kansas City section. Zac is an Eagle Scout who aspires to make the world a better place for everyone. And so without more speaking on my part, I'm turning it over to Zac. Zac, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. It's great to see everyone. Or if you're watching this recording, thanks for tuning in. And without further ado, we're going to dive into this risk management journey together. To start off, I'll provide a brief definition of what risk is. I'll talk about why risk management's important, the purpose of it. Then I'll look at some of the key elements of risk management. I'll present a basic framework that you can use when you're thinking about managing risks at your organization or at an enterprise level. And then I'll share some lessons that I've learned from my experience working in this space. And as Doug had mentioned, we will have some kind of interactive questions at a couple different parts of this. So to start off, you might wonder, what is risk in the first place? You've probably heard this term at the workplace. You probably played some part in this and some of the work you do. A simple way that I think about risk is the possibility that you could have some kind of loss that occurs, and it could be a direct or indirect loss. Um, and there could be an internal event that happens, so it could be something specific within your organization, or it could be an event that occurs outside of it. And a recent example of an external event that occurred for a lot of us was the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, a lot of us knew that a pandemic was a risk that could occur. We just hadn't had one on a global scale in over about a century or so. Um, and just as that risk surprised us, there are other risks that could come along and surprise us as well. Another one, mostly in the context of the US, about 20 some years ago, we had the terrorist attacks of 9/11 happen. Again, terrorism, it's always kind of an ongoing risk that could occur, but to have an event of that scale and that kind of visibility um, really was not very common, but it changed a lot of policies and procedures that we have in our country because of that. And so in the context of our workplace, some of the common risks that we might see, resourcing, so not having enough people, enough funding, enough technology or stuff you need to be able to produce stuff or solve problems. In the context of where we are within Quality 4.0, starting to move toward Quality 5.0, having some kind of technology issue. It could be your device, the network, connectivity, and so on. But then also issues around safety, so making sure employees follow the right processes and procedures to have a safe work environment and reduce the number of incidents that could occur. And that brings us to risk management. And so a simple way I think about this is how we manage risk that we know about on a day-to-day basis, or even kind of at a more enterprise level. And through managing risk effectively, we increase our chance of being successful as an organization, but also making sure our employees are safe and our stakeholders. It helps us be prepared. To give a real example of this, there's a company within the Midwest. It's called Nebraska Furniture Mart. They've been around since the Depression era. Um, and when the 2008 and 9 recession happened, they had so many more assets than liabilities that they did not have to lay off anyone. So they had a financial risk of recession happen, but they had so many assets. I mean, imagine your organization being in that position where you wouldn't have to let go of anyone during a brief economic downturn. I think that'd be a great position to be in. And then risk management, a big part of it stems in this idea of being proactive. So helping improve communication in your organization across different stakeholders, reducing the impact that a risk could have to your organization or associates, but then also reducing safety incidents. So helping our workplaces be safer and striving to be safer in the long term. And in case you were wondering, so some more in the quality world context, as I was doing research for this, I found that risk management came up in several places on ISO standards. So for quality management standards, this environmental section, and also information security. But then also uh, risk management comes up in the context of auditing. So making sure you're being compliant with industry standards regarding managing risk, even managing processes, or in the development of products or services within an organization. And so you might wonder, well, how could I start with my risk management process? Where do I begin? I know what risk is. I know a little bit about risk management. I know it might be in an ISO or auditing standard. A good place to start is to identify all the different risks that could happen. And to start off, so negative risks. These are risks or stuff that could happen that could cause harm to organization. Um, so for everyone on here, if you're watching the recording, I'd like for you to take a few minutes. Feel free, you can write down or put in the chat. I want you to think about this question. What do you think could go wrong in your organization? What do you think are some negative risks that could occur?
Please be sure to put your text or your comments in the chat, all right? And we'll be collecting them.
Okay, great. I'm seeing a bunch of responses. Okay, Doug, do you want to share a couple of the responses you're seeing or any of the patterns? Wow, I'm seeing a lot. So staffing, um, experience, I'm seeing some environmental ones. So being in the Midwest, so storms or tornadoes, that's always a concern.
Yeah. Supply
Understanding
chain
changes.
disruptions. Ooh, there's a biggie.
Oh, Doug, what was it again?
Supply chain disruptions. That's a biggie.
Yep. Supplies not on time. Doug, were there any other ones that stood out that you saw?
Um, okay, loss of key personnel. Um,
Yep.
you know, a number of them just say poor quality, and that's again reputational damage. We just have to name one company in that Boeing, so that kind of explains that. Um, Supply chain challenges, system hacking, yeah, flooding and storms.
Yep. So that's environmental or natural disasters. Okay, knowledge loss, historical information. And if you look for a lot of these risks, they come back to resourcing, could be changes in technology or even just change management in general. So you have a key associate leave, you have some loss of um, knowledge or context around the organization. Now, I want everyone to take a second. So as I was learning about risk, I remember hearing about this idea of positive risk, which really kind of had my head spinning. I had to think about for a while, but these are opportunities that could happen for your organization. So I want everyone to take a second and go from having your negative risk hat on, try putting on a positive risk hat on, and think about what is stuff that you think could go well for your organization. So take a few minutes. Feel free to put that in the chat.
And Zach, these seem to have a lot to do with new products or things like that.
I see that. So expansion, innovation, automation, process improvement, happy customers. That's great. Let's see, growth, training staff, so new capabilities, new skills. Okay. Yep, you bring on new associates. That's good. So bringing on perhaps some younger, older generations that bring unique perspectives. Let's see. Hmm. Someone just put an interesting one. Proud employees. So having high internal customer satisfaction, that would definitely be a opportunity. Doug, do you see any other patterns at all in the responses?
I think a number of them deal with market shifts. Um, since nobody controls the market completely, if the market shifts in your favor, that's absolutely a positive risk.
Okay, good. Awesome. And for a lot of these, they stem down to so cost savings, so being able to save more money than you anticipated, efficiency, which could go towards so training employees, automation, but also effectiveness, so improving your quality, perhaps lowering your defect rate. All of those could be opportunities that we want to happen. Someone just put strategic partnerships as well, that we want to be able to try to plan for. So as we're brainstorming or trying to figure out how to identify risks, and I love all the stuff in the chat. Honestly, we might want to save that. Might be a good reference tool for some of the folks here. A few tools I found that could be helpful for identifying risks. So one of them is brainstorming, which we just did. So think about all the possibilities that could happen. And a good place to start, you could look at some of your past work experience, past projects, maybe quality improvement initiatives that you've been on, and then talk to other people, get input from stakeholders or different teams or associates you have. Now, I'll caution you, you want to be careful. You don't want to come up with like 1,000 different risks, because if you have too many, you might look and be like, oh, well, this is too risky. We can't do it. So just do the best you can. As long as you feel like you get most of them, that's what's important, or the important ones. Um, there's this game called Sailboat. You might have heard me talk about before. So you draw a sailboat, and your drawing doesn't have to be the best in the world. Um, and as you draw this sailboat, imagine that as your organization or your project or your quality improvement initiative you're working on, and think about what could blow the sailboat forward. So doing stuff like risk mitigation, having proper resourcing, um, making sure your sponsors engage so they can knock out obstacles. That stuff will help the sailboat keep moving, but then also think about the anchors, stuff that could hold it back. So it'd be like there's downtime in technology, or there's an interdependency we didn't manage well, so a handoff from one process to another. Um, Another anchor might be training or loss of institutional knowledge, so poor knowledge management. Doing a SWOT analysis, this is another tool that I think is helpful in the terms of identifying risk. I feel like it gives a holistic view. So looking at strengths, so what's stuff that's going well, weaknesses, what are some areas we could improve in, opportunities, what stuff that we could be doing better, or other ways to leverage our strengths, and then threats. So that's stuff that's external to an organization or group. Um, so it can help you think of negative risk, but also positive ones as well. I see someone put pest analysis is another good framework as well. And it helps you give, so not only look at negative and positive risk, but also you can look at internal factors, but then also external factors that could influence the organization in a risk context. Okay, so we've brainstormed a list of risks that could occur. We might have used some tools to help further flesh out or identify risks. Then we want to go through and narrow down that risk, the list that we have. There might be some that are not going to occur, but as you're narrowing down your list, you want to look and see the probability and impact. So probability, think about that as the chance that a risk might happen. And so low probability, I'm thinking odds of that occurring are very low. Might not see that occur at all. Medium, there's a chance it might happen. Wouldn't be surprised if it occurred. High would be it's going to happen at some point. And this could change over time. So when you do this risk analysis at that time, you might identify something as low. So for example, I'm sure a lot of us thought pandemic was a very low risk, but then as time went on, as our world became more interconnected, in some ways maybe that shifted somewhere in between low to medium, and it took something like the COVID-19 pandemic to make that a high risk at least for a couple years. And then in terms of impact, this is the effect that if a risk occurs, how does that affect a team or organization? And so low impact, people probably wouldn't see it. Medium impact, there would definitely be some groups that see it, some processes that be affected. And then high impact, that could be, I think of it as a significant disruption to the whole organization. An interesting part about impact is that there are also financial implications that could be carried with that as well, depending on the level of severity or the amount of impact to the organization as a whole that occurs. And then once we've looked at our probability and our impact for each risk we've identified, then we want to assign a risk owner. So someone that, if this risk occurs, they can help address it. And this could vary based on the type of work you're doing or the initiative. You might have different risk owners. You could have multiple risk owners. Maybe you have someone that's in charge of multiple risks that occur, which is okay. Um, the important part too to bear in mind with the risk owner is it needs to be someone, probably mid or upper level management or organization. They need to have the authority to be able to address the risk if it occurs. So to make decisions, reallocate resources, provide guidance on what to do. And in terms of risk ownership, it's important to engage other stakeholders. So to see, are there other places that could be affected? Maybe you need like a steering committee, so a group of managers if, a risk that has a high impact occurs. There could be multiple departments or different stakeholder groups involved, so that might require a steering committee. But I think the most important part about this is that if you have someone assigned as a risk owner, you need to make sure they're aware of it. You don't want to have a risk happen and then be like, hey, on my risk form, I had you as the risk owner. You don't want to have that as a surprise. You want them to at least be aware that they're listed on your risk register, whatever tool you're using to track your risks and your risk owners. And then you want to develop a risk register, and if you're watching this or if you're watching the recording, I'm happy to send some examples of this afterward if you'd like to reach out to me. Um, this is a tool to help kind of organize all your risk information into one place. And it's got your evaluated risks on it, so it's got the risk that's been identified, your probability, your impact, your risk owner. It's got your risk management plan, your contingency plan, all of it in one place. And then it shows the risk status. So has the risk occurred? Um, did it happen? Did it not happen? Are we watching out for it? Is there a chance it might occur later on in a project or initiative or wherever we're going with our organization? And some benefits. And I've developed some of these for different initiatives I've worked on. It's great to have all this information documented in one place. So going back to what we did earlier, imagine you're working in a group on a project, you come up with all these risks that could occur, some of them are really good, and then they're not documented anywhere. And then let's say a few months later, you're managing your project, you're like, hey, we thought about this risk, but I forgot what it was. So having it all documented in one place just makes it easier to manage. And then you can track the status of it in real time. And in terms of enterprise risk management, I'm pretty sure there's software out there that can help you do that. Um, for projects or initiatives, it depends on how much in real time they need that. But I found for the stuff I've done, just having it on the register and then checking on it at different status update meetings is enough. And then the other part is it's clear who the risk owner is, but then you also have your mitigation plan on there. So again, you're not having to hunt it down or look at different documents or remember conversations you had 3, 6 months ago, or even a year ago. And then once we have gone through as we're developing our risk register, it's really important to think about mitigation. So it's great we've identified a list of risks. It's great we've analyzed them, we've narrowed them down. We've thought about the probability and impact. We've assigned a risk owner. If the risk happens, we have to be able to do something about it. We don't just want it to occur and then we're just staring at a wall or not sure what to do. So in terms of risk mitigation, it's thinking about what will you do if a risk happens. And you can include a contingency in this. So if a risk occurs and let's say that you use your mitigation, you've got, so kind of your first option, you can come up with a second, a third, a fourth option, and you want to recognize that for some of these there might be a resource commitment tied to them. And so you want to make sure your organization or your team's aware of that. And some options to look at in terms of mitigation. Um, one of them, uh, since there are all these risks out there that could happen that might have, low impact, low probability, there might be some that you just have to accept. So for example, like one right now, we're accepting there's a risk that the recording for this webinar might not work. Now again, the probability of that happening, probably pretty low. Impact would probably be medium to high. Definitely affect being able to watch this back. But again, that's something we accept. Another one we accept, our internet connections being stable. Um, you can also avoid a risk. So the picture on the bottom, that caution sign, that's an example of trying to avoid a risk. Watch out for low water. Um, one example, at a different organization, I saw that they created a game where associates would identify safety issues through looking for rattlesnakes. So they did a rattlesnake simulation in a factory. Now they didn't have real rattlesnakes. That would add a whole lot of risk to this activity. But they had associates go and find these fake rattlesnakes and report them as safety incidents. And this got so ingrained in the culture of this organization that they got t-shirts about it. They had a competition to see who could identify the most risks. So that's one example of how you could avoid a risk. Also putting up caution signs, even thinking about how you structure your workplace. For example, before this webinar started, and the room I'm in, the lighting comes in a certain way, so it makes me look darker. So um, by avoiding the risk of my lighting being messed up, I have made some changes in the room and then it fixed that. You can also transfer risk to someone else. So you can say, hey, if this risk occurs, this other organization is going to address it, or this team or this person. Insurance is kind of an example for that. If you buy auto insurance and there's an incident that happens, they would be the ones that would pay out for that. Now, of course, it depends on the circumstances. And then escalation is another option. So if you've done all that you can, if your team has done all that they can, you want to be able to send that risk to someone else. So probably a manager, maybe even an upper manager, more at a contingency level. So kind of like your second option. And as we look beyond risk planning, so we've identified our risks, we've narrowed them down, we've gone through, looked at the probability and impact, we've developed our mitigation, perhaps contingency. It's more than just that. It's an ongoing activity where we want to monitor risk that occurs and bear in mind that there are new risks out there that could come up. Um, and that risk could happen anytime. So again, having a pandemic risk, a terrorist attack, disruptions in the supply chain. It's not stuff that we want to happen. It's not like any of us wake up tomorrow and we're like, hey, I want to have a major supply chain disruption occur so my business can be backed up 3 or 6 months. But these are things that we just have to be mindful of. Um, it's interesting, kind of in a macro sense, going back to the supply chain issue, a response we've seen from industry is onshoring. So manufacturing coming back to the US and kind of this resurgence of domestic supply chains. So it's kind of more of an industry recognition of that supply chain risk that occurred. And then by monitoring our risks, it helps us be proactive about it. So we're not waiting for a risk to happen. We're doing some planning on the front end and we're doing the best we can. Sometimes as much as we plan, there might be stuff that goes wrong, but having that plan in place, having those mitigations and contingencies, that could help us, control damage that occurs if a negative risk happens. And then there's also a financial aspect to this. So as we think about budgeting for risks, so it's heavily affected by the chance of a risk occurring, but also what the impact would be. So if it's a big loss to maybe something minor. And then thinking about how do we fund this in the first place? Um, in the context of projects, you typically build in about 10% for a contingency. So if a risk occurs, at an enterprise level, you might have some reserves set aside, or another option to look at is buying insurance. And a lot of organizations, they've invested in cybersecurity insurance, could be property and damage, general liability. All of that stuff helps. So that way, if a incident occurs, you've got some financial resources to help cover it, so you don't have as much business disruption because of it. And then as we think about our current risk landscape and as we look ahead beyond Industry 4.0 toward Industry 5.0, in the context of negative risks, so stuff that could go wrong, you've probably heard about cybersecurity. This will be an ongoing issue, and probably the impact of it, probability will probably continue to increase as time progresses, as we um, further develop our digital ecosystems. Um, and on cybersecurity, there's simple ways that we can mitigate the risk for that. Employee retention, culture is another one. So being able to retain the associates we have, whether they're in older or younger generations. Sustainability is another one. Some of you might have seen ASQ's efforts to engage in social responsibility. That'll be critical. But then there are also opportunities ahead. So, hopefully you don't feel like the world is so bleak, at least at this point. But there's opportunities with automation to free up our time to be able to do higher level tasks. There's opportunities to help improve our workplace, allow more flexibility and more work-life integration or balance, but then also have safer workplaces because of technology and process improvement. And so as I look back, just on my time working in this space with risk management, some of the lessons I've learned in terms of risk planning, it's important to think about who's involved in those conversations, making sure you have the right stakeholders engaged. You want to take the time up front to be able to thoroughly identify risks. Again, you don't want to have a list of thousands of risks, but make sure you have enough and you've identified some of your big ones that you feel like will have the biggest effect. And then there's this saying you want to hope for the best, but then be prepared if stuff will go wrong. None of us wake up, the next day and are like, gee, I'm real excited to be sick or have a supply chain issue or have my computer not work. You want to be ready in case some of those risks do occur, have some mitigation options in place. And then in terms of risk mitigation, you want to look and see who are your risk owners and make sure they know that they're the risk owner. So that way it's not a surprise. Because someone finding out they're a risk owner, it's not like celebrating a birthday or a work milestone. It's probably, if they're hearing about it, it's probably not good for the most part. If it's a positive risk that's occurred, it's great, but most of the time it's more on the negative side. And then think about contingency plans. So think beyond just kind of one option to address a risk. Think of perhaps a second or a third option. The more options you have, that helps contain some of the damage or some of the loss that could occur because of a negative risk. And then continue to monitor risk. Recognize it's an ongoing activity you want to do on a project, on an initiative, or even just at an enterprise level in general. And then in terms of emerging risks, so stuff that's emerging or developing, um, making sure your technology is updated, that helps solve a lot of the cybersecurity concerns, also a lot of the issues with technology in general. Be open to new trends, do some experimentation with AI, some of the other technology tools. Look for those opportunities for efficiency, improved effectiveness. Also work with your vendors. They're helping provide technology. Increasingly, we're seeing organizations partner with companies that provide, quality management software, customer relationship management tools. You want to make sure that their systems can properly integrate with yours. So having those good relationships with your suppliers or your third-party vendors, that helps solve some of that risk on the front end, and that helps the communication between your organization and them. Okay, so you've heard me talk a lot about the risk management process at a high level. Now it's your turn. So I'm going to present a few scenarios. This is the first one related to cybersecurity. So imagine you're at an organization, you've got outdated systems, you have stuff that's maybe been out of support for 10 or 15 years, maybe longer. You're working on going through a digital transformation, so bringing in some new systems to help replace those. And you've heard a lot about cybersecurity concerns that there's a chance employees could be compromised, information might get jeopardized. You might have compliance standards such as HIPAA or some healthcare standards you're trying to be careful about related to personal information. So I'd encourage you to think from a risk standpoint, what would you do to address some of that? So as you're bringing in this new IT system, what do you think are some risks that could occur, and what do you think are some ways that you could address it or try to be proactive? So as Doug had mentioned earlier, so feel free to post in the chat, and then I'll give everyone a couple minutes, and then we'll kind of regroup and we'll talk about some of the common answers.
Zach, we've been getting some really great questions so far. I've been collecting them from everybody. So
Awesome.
we'll get to go over those in a couple minutes. Testing, fast tracking, hire an expert, train
Good. I'm
employees,
seeing a lot of testing, doing some training.
validations. Yeah.
Yep, communication. And sometimes you need to bring in external experts. That's okay. They're the experts for a reason. They can often help provide guidance on issues like this.
Here's one really specific. Parts of data migration incompatible, so it doesn't migrate or it's transposed. Sounds like somebody's been there.
Yes, well, and that can happen with legacy systems. You often have data stored there, and you have to find a way to migrate it to the new system. Having like a data crosswalk of some kind can be difficult. Okay, using a Gantt chart. So I see people mentioning tools. That's really good. Looking at other systems. Awesome. So as we think about cybersecurity, um, as a risk. So some thoughts on mitigation you could have in terms of your current systems or the systems you're preparing to migrate to, making sure that they're up to date. Um, random fact in case you didn't know. So if you have Microsoft tools, it's usually the second Tuesday of each month. They'll release monthly patches. Going in, doing your monthly patches or your monthly updates for your computer, having multi-factor authentication. So that just means when you log into something, it'll ask you, hey, I'm going to text you a code, or you have to put this in. That second step to make sure it's really you. Um, and then having strong passwords, doing those three things does a lot to help with cybersecurity at organizations. Conducting an inventory, so seeing what systems do you have, what systems are being phased out, as you're doing a digital transformation, what systems do you still need, or do you need to phase out perhaps in the future? And then provide training. There are some insurance organizations, they require this to do annual cybersecurity training in order to help reduce premiums, but then also to protect your employees because all it takes is one bad actor and they can cause a lot of damage within organizations. And then some other points to think about related to cybersecurity and doing a digital transformation. So having the right data governance team in place, so engaging stakeholders regarding what to do with different types of organizational data, having that roadmap in place. So telling people, hey, here's where we are with our legacy system. In a year or two, we're going to be here. In another year or two, we're going to be here. And at this point, we're going to move off of our legacy system or disconnect it completely. Having that vision can help people see where you're going. And then I talked earlier about the third party systems and vendors, making sure you're tracking your integration. So it's the different systems that your core system would talk to, and working with your vendors to make sure those all still work in your new system. All right, so let's do another scenario, and some of you might have lived through this over the last couple of years or seen this at the workplace. So imagine you're at an organization, you're seeing your turnover increase over an extended period of time. Your work satisfaction has gone down, your employee morale is really low, and you're seeing more requests from associates to engage in remote or hybrid work. So for hybrid, it'd be like working at home 1 or 2 or a couple days a week. So the question is, from a risk standpoint, what do you think are some of the risks that are occurring in this scenario? And then what are some ways you think you could address it? And a lot of this ties back to also employee or organizational culture. Okay, good. I'm seeing a lot of surveys,
Work-life
looking at
balance,
burnout.
work-life balance. Um, engage with the team more.
Yep.
Oh, Christy, actually act on the survey results. That
Yes,
that's a
that's
big
important.
piece.
Yes, because you can put the survey out there, and then if you don't respond to it, or at least try to, it'll make people distrustful of your leadership. Okay, having smaller groups, so focus groups is good. Team building, that's good. Empowering folks to get involved. So I saw a lot of that engaging employees in the solution. So that's really good. And I think I saw some yep, recognition, that's good. So as we think about risk mitigation in terms of employee retention and culture, investing in appreciation programs, I think is critical. And honestly, for some of it, it doesn't even have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't cost me any money to tell someone they're doing great at what they're doing, or to take a few minutes and say, "Hey, I saw you got a promotion," or I see that you're leaving. I appreciate getting to work with you. I wish you the best. It doesn't cost you any money. It costs you a little bit of time, but doing small stuff like that, taking time to get to know people, goes away at addressing this risk of, people not feeling engaged or like they belong at a workplace. Doing team building activities, so doing those on a regular basis, um, is good. And then providing roadmaps. So when the Great Resignation occurred a couple of years ago, where we saw this massive turnover in our workforce, um, having that career roadmap, that was one of the main pain points that was identified in a lot of the data, was that people didn't see a path forward or a future at their organization. So they figured, well, if there's no future, then I'll just jump ship somewhere else. And some other points to think about with regards to culture. So offering mentoring programs, and this is good for younger generations, but also reverse mentoring. So seeing how younger generations can help engage your older, more experienced generations, providing enrichment opportunities. So providing an opportunity, for example, to join an organization like ASQ, get engaged, get to come to webinars like this, conferences. That could be considered career enrichment and investment in associates. And then encouraging innovation and new ideas. So I liked how a lot of you said engaging different associates and getting them involved is a part of the solution. That's great. And here's some additional resources that could help out. I know some people asked about this at the beginning. So this article on rethinking risk management from PMI, I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, the second one on managing the risk of generative AI. This is specific to artificial intelligence, but there are a lot of interesting points here as we think about technology and digital transformation. So Rita Mulcahy, she wrote a PMP exam prep book. There's a whole section in there on risk management that I think is really helpful. And then for videos, so there's one there about AI. The second one's on enterprise risk management. So it's looking at risk management from an organizational level, not just from a project or initiative level. And then the last one by Will Gadd, it's just a fun video I found on some tools to think about risk management in general. And so from this session, I'm hoping that we took some time, we provide a basic definition of what risk is, why risk management's important, what that is. We went through some of the key elements of risk management, so identifying risk. I provide some tools you could use to help do that. Once you narrow down your list that you've got, looking at your probability and impact, creating the risk register, adding your risk owner on that, and then also your mitigation, and then monitoring risk. So beyond doing all that analysis, making sure you're monitoring risk on an ongoing basis. And I shared some lessons I've learned along the way, and then we went through a few scenarios together, which was awesome. I want to thank everyone for their participation in that. And then here's my contact information. So I saw there were some requests for the slides, so feel free, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you want to email me, either one's fine. So, but again, I appreciate that everyone attended tonight, or that you watched this recording. I hope that this helped expand some of your knowledge base on risk management. More than happy to connect. And I'd encourage you, if you can, get involved with ASQ, a great organization. Really excited to be a part of QMD. And check out these webinars. This is one example of an awesome program they helped put together. There's a whole bunch out there, also on their YouTube page. And then this is a part of a 3-part series related to Quality 4.0. If you want to see the first part related to virtual teams, go to the Quality Management Division YouTube page. You can watch the recording there.
Zach, I just placed the link to your previous video on this in the chat.
Awesome.
Okay, then. Wow. So, I understand that some people may have to go, but we want to thank you for doing this. We're going to do some questions and answers now. I would like to thank Zach for what he's given us here, and we will stop the recording so that the question and answers aren't in it. We will do Q&A after we stop the recording, that is.